this is here just in case. Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, the weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. My throat is a little raspy from all the yelling and recording and speaking I've been doing this last week with patch 4.2. So apologies that this is going to be a video that is on the shorter side. We're not going to be doing Twitch live questions this week. We're only going to be doing questions from the YouTube side of things, and apologies for I'll probably have to do that quite frequently today as well. So kind of like last week, I want to do my sponsors here right at the beginning of the show. And again, it's the start of the month, so if my list didn't update properly, please let me know if your name is supposed to be on this list with a message or something, and I will add it to you. We have Patreon now, and we've had it for the past few months, and it's mostly there to combat hashtag demonetized here on YouTube. I also do a shout out here at the beginning or at the end of Mondays with Mr. Happy and Stay the Realm. So let's thank our sponsors for this week. We have our standard sponsors first of Cidus Oreo on Shiva, Syd Hellwind of Gilgamesh, Afro Ninja from Malboro, Cheesecake from Leviathan, Sploda, That Lame Weeb, Ashen, Emiya of Cerberus, Argoti, Fafarian, Rendil, Giraffeswillrule, Stevie-Rex, and Neon. We have our elite sponsors, that of Darkgraver, Skia Symphonia from Ragnarok, Rah Xephon from Exodus, Rynoet Westos, the Purple Warrior, Yadric Red Seal on Exodus, Lexxie Valentine, Mantaru and the Rivivus Free Company from Zodiark, Sour Cream and Chives from Jenova, Goetia Valfer of Serren, Hirschverse of Fairy, Phoenix Down, Free Company on Goblin, Cerren from Zodiark, and Rynoet Chikara. And then we have our premium sponsors. We have Oscar, we have Crass, we have Mustang, the Serenity FC on Ultros, Cat Kazuma, Kyrioshi and the Reckless Tea Party on Cactar, Ignis Fairgun, Velestra of Famfrit, Ignis Fairgun from Diablos, Velestra of Famfrit, Noct Cordis from Excalibur, Krovos Moonscar, Nakaneyame, Janua Odin, Private Mikey, Aqua's Sacrifice, Spike, Nadia and Kirasame, Rudy Rudiger, Tin Colossus, Killer Hackman, Raul Jr, Arthur Emil Gaming Bishop, and Kiltastic Jones. And we, of course, have our Patron of Light. I'm sorry, I can't do it as well as Mary because I don't have the voice changer. Khuja Cross from the Jenova server. Thank you for being the shining light that combats the demonetization. But anyway, I wanted to do that first. I'm just going to move on over into the Q&A. I'm also not doing any cuts this week. I'm doing one of those straight from Twitch to YouTube things. So I'm just going to pop it on the screen like this. Boop, and we're going to get started. We're going to do it all in one take. If there are mistakes, then too bad. So first question. Hey, Mr. Happy, I forgot to give you a first-time bonus last week, so I have a bonus of unlimited popcorn as you watch the good old roulette known as the main scenario roulette. Yeah. Great. Anyway, 4.2 question. No 4.2 spoiler Reno. I myself have played previous Final Fantasy games such as 6, so the bosses they introduced I enjoyed. However, for someone who is new to the franchise, what they feel is the story leading up to Omega and meaning to these encounters provides a weak story. It feels as if the raid tier story will deliver anything impactful to remember for new franchise players. I think at this point you pretty much ignore the individual challenges themselves and look at the interactions between Nero, Cid, Alpha, Midgard, Sormer, the Warrior of Light, and Omega. And I feel like those have been, for the most part, satisfactory. I thought that the second patch didn't continue Omega as well as Omega started in terms of story, having now read it. And I'll be doing a video on that sometime soon. But I think it's just don't care. You know everyone's talking about the bosses, and obviously that means you kind of feel left out, and that doesn't feel great. But if you want anything to remember them by, just remember either the fights themselves, not for what they were in Final Fantasy VI, but for what they are in 14. And also, just pay attention to the actual story going on within the Omega raid. And that'll be the thing that the new players should be able to latch onto a little bit better than the nostalgic memories of the old games. Moving on to the next. I almost forgot I was doing this in one take, and I was about to burp and then like do a separate cut. But moving right on to the second question. Hi, Mr. Happy. I can't remember on whether or not I've asked a question, so the first-time bonus is the best Philly cheesesteak according to your taste ever. I'm so hungry. I gotta eat after this. How do you usually balance leveling jobs with Disciple and Northland? Oh, you. I just use the beast tribes, the crafting beast tribes. That's all I do. And I don't really care at what rate I level them because I'm not trying to actually level them for anything useful. From what Ash recommends, you generally want to keep them all leveled around the same time. You can gather the materials you need to make certain items, and then you can make items that allow you to make items with other crafters. And as long as you keep them all around the same level, then you should be able to basically be self-sufficient. It's a very long grind to be entirely self-sufficient while leveling and not lose money. But if you do it correctly, you not only not lose money, you also make money while leveling up your crafters and gatherers that way. But it can be incredibly tedious because you basically need a full plan going forward on how to level, what job to level this one to, or what crafter to level to first, and then what should I level after, and then how many of this material do I need, and etc, etc. But if you could do it that way, it can be very fulfilling, and you'll make a lot of money leveling, which is not something that usually happens. I don't have a system at all. I just do Beast Tribe quests when they become available. I'll level my current crafters from 60 to 70 when we get a crafting Beast Tribe, which I'm presuming is going to be in 4.3. No hard proof of that yet, just presuming it. Number 3, hey Mike, question if you've tried it. If not, let's test. Asking question before a patch goes live. That's a good note to have. Back in Heaven's Word, it was proven using the job Astro, you could underflow on enmity. This was the ability to generate negative enmity, thus boosting you to the absolute maximum. If anyone's familiar with some old school RPGs, underflow is actually not a new concept. I remember that in Final Fantasy VII in particular, you could underflow damage and basically one-shot bosses doing that. I remember seeing tons of videos on it. And it was and you could basically do the same thing here. When you go below 0, you basically hit a value that's so high, there's no way anybody could reach you. Now, you're not even just at a high value, but you're at a negative value at the same time. So because you're at a negative value, it puts you at the top of the list. But also, if someone provokes on you, it won't even work because your enmity is technically lower than that. It's stupid. It's insanely weird. It's a numbers game, and if you understand it, it makes a whole lot more sense than it makes sense to you, and I'm not explaining it properly, basically. Yeah, and you even say no one could even take it back with provoke. In order to do this, you needed smoke modifier, their sect modifier, and the MP regen skill. Now with diversion being 90%, if you throw smoke on that same target, is it causing underflow? No one's reported it, but I don't think anyone's tried it either. So I don't believe they would have fixed this. Or they would have thought ahead with the diversion change to fix it. But it might be something they fix naturally, that they don't allow enmity to fall under a certain value anymore. And I mean, the answer is, if they didn't fix it, it absolutely will still work. If they did fix it, then your enmity probably hits 0 and then stops. But we don't know which one it is yet, so we need to test it. That's it. It just needs to be tested to see if you can underflow on enmity again. Next question. Hey, Mr. Happy, how you doing? You doing all right? Never gets old. Yeah, I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. First time questioner, so I have a bonus of a big steak, potatoes, and a Yorkshire pudding. Didn't expect that last one. My question for you is, what is your favorite encounter in the game since Realm Reborn? We had some amazing fights from Coils to Alexander to Omega and all the primals. It's tough to call that because I look at encounters very differently as someone who loves to raid hardcore. Like, I look at probably Sigmascape different than a lot of other people in terms of what those encounters consist of versus, I guess, what they actually are. It's tough because I really like, 8-8 Savage, which was Brute Justice and his winged form. I really liked Turn 8 Savage, going back to Coils. I really liked Ultimate. I think in terms of a satisfying completion to a fight, I feel like Ultimate just comes together so well. Ultimate Coil in particular comes together so well that I have to give it to Ultimate Coil. It was just such a pleasure to go through that fight. It's unfortunate that I only got to naturally prog up to the 4th trio before eventually having that group that Kyo put together that was mixed. Some people had cleared, some people hadn't, because I feel like I definitely didn't get to learn it as authentically as you do when you go in with 8 people who don't know what they're doing versus 3 people who don't and 5 people who do. But even with that still, it was just like an amazing encounter to go through, to learn, and to overcome. So thanks for the question, and all the best to you this year's stream, and 4.2, happy 4.2 to you too. Hopefully you're enjoying it. Number 5, hello, Mr. Happy. Hope you've had a good week. I'll bet a busy one, I bet, with all the things coming out. Anyway, 2 questions. 1, how are you liking Monster Hunter World? I like it, but I'm not in the boat that it's this, like, end-all, be-all, greatest thing that's ever happened, like I've seen some other people claiming. I can point out some very clear flaws with that game. In terms of certain decisions that were made, I'd have to make, it would take up an entire video for me to cover all of my thoughts about Monster Hunter World. But overall, I think that they realize that if a game isn't fun to play, then it's barely a game at all. So while they might have a lot of hiccups in things like user interface or interactions with NPCs, you know, having basically a meaningless story, which is what Monster Hunter fans come to expect, but it doesn't mean you should excuse it as an element of the game. They know that as long as you're having a fucking great time killing monsters, that's all that's going to matter to you in the end. And they nailed that part. So the other things are all, I think all the other aspects of the game almost feel like they're just there to exist because they have to. But if Capcom could, they'd literally drop you in a forest with a sword and say, good fucking luck. I'm waiting for that Monster Hunter game where it's just some like open world Monster Hunter where they just drop you in the world and you gotta go like that. And there's no hubs or anything. That's a thing. That would be a thing. So anyway, number 2, why does Square seem to hate Dark Knight and Monk? They don't hate Monk. They just don't understand us. Those monk buffs were sick, so I'm not complaining at all. For Dark Knight, so I saw a post on Reddit today about Dark Knight, about how people look at it in a different light because it does the least DPS and it has the least raid utility. But it was said that a lot of people undervalue one thing Dark Knight is unparalleled at, and that is self-survival. Because Blackest Night is able to be used so frequently, even with the least amount of technical cooldowns, Dark Knight will basically out-survive a lot of mechanics without you really needing to expend a lot of extra resources because of Blackest Night. And that does play an important role. It's just that if it's not valuable to the community, then it is something that needs to be addressed, I feel. Dark Knight is fine, it's just not in the same position as the other tanks. That's not always a problem, but when there's 2 raid spots for tanks and there's 3 tanks, people are a lot more stringent than when there's 4 slots for DPS and there's, you know, way more DPS than that, because then you start going, well, we can't just cherry pick 4. Obviously there's a meta comp, but you know, we won't always be able to get that, so people are a lot more lenient with that role, it feels, than they are with the healer and the tank role. Although the healers are relatively balanced, even though I think Astro is probably the weakest of the bunch at this point, or at least the least valued by the community for anything but speed kills, I feel. That being said, you know, just because something's fine doesn't mean it can't be improved. Doesn't mean that you can't make the player experience better. So when you see people saying, you know, I can't stand how Dark Knight is, you know, yeah, sometimes it does come off as a little whiny. Even when I do it and I meme on it a little bit, it comes off that way as well. But you need to, but I think it's important to note that if a job's not fun for the people who are playing it, then it's worth addressing. It's not just a matter of, oh, it's fine, it can do the content. It's a matter of it coming together as something that players want to play, not just okay to play. So I think that, I don't know what they're doing with Dark Knight, man, but I think they need to actually like have some of the experienced tanks come in, talk to them, tell them what they want. And then obviously moderate it a little bit, because what top tier tanks want and what like your average or casual tank wants are very different things. But I think they could actually do with a QA session with players as opposed to just their internal team, or a test realm. Even honestly, test realms they don't even use. Most games don't use for balance purposes. They just make a change. They just make sure the change works. They don't even want to like actually adjust it. Depends on the game, but it's never used. I don't feel like it's never used to its fullest extent for stuff like that. Next question. Hello, Mister Finger Pew Pew. Important question. When and why should I ditch Fist of Fire and use Fist of Wind and Wind Tackle? So I need to actually test it. From what I've seen from other monks, the current consensus is that Wind Tackle is not worth using. A part of me just finds it hard to believe, but having not tested it myself, I'm in no position to debate it. So I need to do some opener tests with it. The obvious opener being the, you know, starting with Wind Tackle to get to a quick 2 stacks before PBing. But you know, until I haven't done the math behind it. I know other people have. I'm going to trust them until I have something that could disprove it. And if I don't have something to disprove it, then it's right. But the answer currently is never. So don't do it, basically. Honestly, if it was just 1 tackle and you got the stack, then it would be fine. It's the fact that it's 2 tackles that's really killing at that point, because if you do it multiple times throughout a fight, then it starts to add up as potential losses. But I gotta imagine that getting the attack speed and the damage, you know, makes up for Fist of Fire. But I don't know. I gotta test it. That's all I know. So number 7, this patch feels kind of Hi Haps, and I hope I just skipped the suplex mechanic in 05, or is it Savage exclusive? Please, QQ Alpha No Savage wasn't as bad as Raul, but still I hate that cliffhanger of this patch's story. Well, no spoilers here, but yeah, I know what the cliffhanger was, so I totally feel you. An idea for a 3rd tier of Omega. I think I've had enough of those. A new glamour system and about Alpha No Savage. I'm gonna take the Alpha No Savage question. Just why? Didn't they get the memo from Raul that this isn't a good idea? Let's see. What if the next NPC who goes savage is named Randy? Is he going to be macho? Is he a macho man? He wants to be A macho man. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why they keep doing it. Like, you can't... See, the thing is, as a player, I like I like instance stuff like that, where you have to go through with the characters in the story. But they need something more consistent for dealing with huge traffic on patch days that that handles these kind of things better. Because as much as I'm okay with these experiences on a fundamental standpoint, the execution of always getting locked out of things, or for watching members of the community get locked out, is never good. So I don't think the question is why do they keep doing it. It's when are they going to get it right? And I don't know what the answer is. Yoshida even tweeted on both the Japanese and the English Twitter, probably on the other Twitters as well, for Final Fantasy XIV, right around the time he was announcing who won the world race for Savage this tier. He also said that he apologizes because of the instance problem and then having to take the servers down, and that they'd have to improve their QA going forward regarding these kinds of things. So I was glad to see that. But yeah, I think it's a matter of when they get it right, because it doesn't seem like they want to stop doing it, but they got to get it right. And that's going to be the important thing. Moving on to the next question. Hi, Happy. Congrats on your 08 Savage clear. Thank you. Don't normally watch Twitch, but I've been loving watching it. Hey, thank you. It's just me, or does it feel like tanks and healers have a significantly harder role compared to DPS? That's because they do. They always do. That's why less people play tanks and healers, because there's more stress related to it. Not only do they have to mitigate and heal on top of doing DPS, but they seem to have often more complex mechanics that's just for them. Not sure how the later mechanics this tier are, but take 04 Savage, for example. Black holes only affect the tanks and healers. All Majest is harder on the healers. And DPS literally only having to stand on the boss for Grand Cross Delta. I think they'd add more DPS-specific mechanics. Yeah, they've done that with some raid tiers. Some raid tiers have been really good about making sure every role has a lot of things. Again, 8 Savage with Brute Justice. Obviously, it's still more stressful in tanks and healers, but I feel like it did a better job of being that fight that stood out like that. That being said, they, no matter what, tanks and healers just always have it harder. That's just kind of always the case. It's just they're so fundamental for the survival of the group. Mechanics that are unavoidable, they have to deal with. Whereas most DPS, if it's unavoidable, it's damage that we wait to get healed up, and then if it is avoidable, our job is to avoid it in the most efficient manner possible so we can get back on the boss. And you know what? Tanks and healers got to do the same thing, and they have another element to the fight. It's always going to be harder for them. It's always going to be harder for those roles than the other roles. Moving on. Let's see. Hello, Mr. Happy Face, and congrats on your 08 Savage clear. Thank you. Quickly, first, a thank you. Your guides have helped my static immensely. We got the 04 Savage mountain weapon for all of our static before 4.2, as well as I didn't make a guide for either of those things. I put videos out on them, but I didn't make a guide. This tier we cleared both 05 and 06 Savage in less than 4 hours. That means you did it before I made a guide. But I'm glad. I guess I put the kill videos out. But yeah, I guess I'm glad it's helping. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. Now for my question. Is the prestige of killing ultimate gone now? No, I still think that it's important to claim, like, hey, we just cleared ultimate. It's one of those things that the reason why people wanted it item level capped, and the reason why it did get item level capped, is because they never wanted to remove a feeling of prestige. Honestly, they could have removed the item level cap, and there still would have been prestige in doing it. It would have meant that you did all the trios correctly. It would have meant that you handled the ad phase. There's so many one-shot mechanics that basically end the fight that even just getting through the mechanics is prestige worthy. Obviously, until Golden, where Exaflare seems silly, but it's really easy to die to it if you misjudge it, even in the slightest. But I don't think the prestige is gone. It's just not the current focus of the fight. If you beat ultimate, you're up there, like in terms of the player base, in terms of your skill. So if your group wants to take it on, I'm sure it'll not only be valuable if you can clear it, because again, there is still that prestige factor, but on top of that, it'll be good practice for 4.3. I have a feeling almost any group that's planning on doing 4.3 ultimate is at some point going to dive back into ultimate coils to make sure they're on the top of their game before the 4.3 ultimate comes out. I'm also of the opinion the 4.3 ultimate is going to get beat a lot faster than 4.1. I don't think it's going to take 11 or 12 days. I don't think it's going to be as long a fight, and that's going to play a role in it. I'm guesstimating the next ultimate actually dies in less than a week. Just because at this point, players have a better idea of what they can expect out of ultimate and what kind of ability combinations they can expect out of ultimate. And with a fight that's probably not going to be 20 minutes, cutting 5 minutes out of the encounter cuts a lot of prog time out of that. So I'm guessing it's going to be a 15-minute encounter that that gets beat a little bit faster, but it's still going to be insanely difficult. So that's where I stand on that front in terms of prestige and ultimate. Let's see here. As you can hear, voice getting a little raspy, so I gotta move quick. Top of the morning, Mr. Happy, long-time listener, first-time writer. So here's a bonus of soundproofing windows to silence your lovely LA drivers. I wish I could. These windows are not good for it. I can't really hang soundproof curtains, which I could buy, but I don't really have a means of hanging them, unfortunately. Before my question, let me quickly say a huge thank you for your inspiration of finally trying raiding again for the first time since beginning coils back in 2.0. As a healer, I've always feared I wasn't up to par to keep the group alive, but you essentially said in numerous episodes people's similar raiding fears, just do it. As such, I've been pugging 05 Savage, and I've honestly been having a lot of fun. Even have a group to invite me to join their static after their healer dropped out, and I stepped up in the party finder. Hey, I like it. And so my question, one of the favorite aspects of 11 is Besiege. Do you think a PvE event like this could work in 14? Dude, it barely worked in 11. Let's be real. Besieged barely worked in 11. It was basically how much could you do when the game stopped lagging. That was all Besiege was. Oh, you're just walking through and all of a sudden you're dead because there actually is about 20 enemies on top of you AoEing and you can't see shit. So let's just clear the floor here. Besiege barely worked in 11. It was a cool idea that had a horrible execution and was mostly just free, like, limit points or EXP for whatever job you wanted them on. Because you couldn't, I don't think you could lose, if I remember correctly, you couldn't lose EXP in Besieged after the first patch for it. I think it could work. I don't think it's one of those things that's a concept that's doomed from the very start, but you need to have infrastructure set in place to actually support the idea. That's what 11 didn't have. 14 has had so many like server hiccups and issues because of code and infrastructure that they've carried over the years and data optimization and storage behind the scenes that I don't know that it could achieve it properly either. So I don't want to say no, but it could be done. Just I think that with all the issues 14's had since it's been remade, I don't think it can be done in 14 in particular. Next question. Hi, Happy. Hope your day's okay. You saw I almost died right there with that. One question for you today, and rather your knowledge. I've recently picked up Ninja before going to 4.2, but I'm kind of falling short on my DPS. The Stone Sky C dummy for Sigma 1 Savage at 2%, roughly 46k remaining. HP, I'm assuming. Would you like to know the finer details about the jobs who Weave Ryton more or Fuma? So, the only thing I'll say is that with Fuma, most people recommend going Fuma nowadays just because there's almost no chance of clipping your GCD. Whereas if you have any sort of latency, even if you don't have much latency, Ryton tends to clip. And every time you do a Ryton, it tends to clip a little bit. And then every time you Ryton, it adds up. And eventually you start losing whole GCDs from playing the job. But other than that, without watching it, I probably couldn't tell. When you don't have Kasatsu or a trick window coming up. So on a 3-minute fight, you'll get a trick attack at the beginning. You'll only get 3 trick attacks on that. So, yeah, well, you'd be saving the Kasatsu for the 3rd trick attack window because you wouldn't be getting, you'd only be getting 2 Kasatsus, 3 trick attacks. And other than that, it should just be, it honestly, I'm trying to think of what could even be different. I wonder, I don't know how your Ninki usage is going. I'd imagine if you're in a still target like that, you're probably starting with the what is it, 6th? I barely remember which GCD. I think a 6th GCD TCJ opener might be what you're starting with. If not, you're doing the 5th GCD TCJ and using, I'm sorry, the 5th GCD Bava and then using TCJ to do your first trick, do your 2nd trick attack. You're probably doing one or the other. I don't remember what the pros and cons are of each of them other than the timing in the opener to make sure you can't fuck it up for any reason. But he doesn't talk in them, so I struggle to understand them as that. Yeah, it's one of those things that's without knowing the whole context, it's hard to really say. You'd have to sit there and watch a 3-minute dummy of somebody. Another thing, yeah, that's my Twitch chat brings up another thing, is that you got to remember that the dummy is only 3 minutes. So you need to make sure that if you're not going to get an extra use of an ability on that dummy, that even though it would be optimal in a real fight, that you can do what's called optimizing for time remaining. Something that you don't pick up if you don't actually practice it, and it's something that I didn't really start learning until after Gordius, or during or after Gordius, is you need to know exactly how much time you have remaining in an encounter. And even though the Stone Sky Sea dummy is only 3 minutes, and it's not realistic to encounters, knowing what you have, like, if for example, let's say there's 50 seconds left in an encounter, your trick attack just came up. If you wait another 20 seconds, you'll have another cooldown. Let's say that it's your Kasatsu. If you wait another 20 seconds, your Kasatsu will come up. I guess I'll say 30 to make it nice and even. Let's say you wait another 30 seconds and you'll have Kasatsu. If you're not going to get another trick attack anyway in that situation, then you might as well just hold the trick attack for 30 seconds and then do it when you have your Kasatsu up for a better burst window. Now, obviously, in a real encounter, there's other people's cooldowns you have to be considering when you use a trick attack, but it would be the same if everyone's pooling for when they have all their cooldowns up, and that's, 30 seconds after your trick attack comes up. Don't just use your trick attack because it was up. You want to use your trick attack in the most optimal way with that one remaining use. The same is true with these dummies with only 3 minutes. For example, if you're at less than 60 seconds left on the dummy and you have 60 seconds left on Huton, then you wouldn't want to armor crush just because you're getting close to 20 to 21 seconds, because it doesn't matter. The fight's going to be over in the next 15 to 20 seconds anyway. So you just want to make sure you're using those GCDs on Aeolian edges. And those are skills you pick up as you go. And it takes a lot of practice. So I think you should just keep watching Momo, because he actually plays it consistently, and just keep practicing. That's how you improve, is practice. And as long as you're open to improvement, you know what? That makes you better than most players that you'll run into in like the Duty Finder or the Party Finder. Being open to practice and to improvement is better than most people can ask. And most people don't really care if you're not as good as the other person, as long as you're open to improvement. That's just how it is. So just keep working on it. Keep using him as a resource. He's the better resource. And keep going. You got this. Next question. Hey, Mr. Happy. Final Sim here. Welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy. Again, Mr. Happy Mondays, a weekly Q&A show where we ask you questions, you answer. I'm getting better at that one. Final Fantasy 6 spoiler. It's fucking like 20 years old. I don't give a shit. Anyway, the three gods who turned into statues, the ones we keep calling the Warring Triad, are these Sephiroth, Sophia, and Zervan? Yes. So in Final Fantasy 6, they were called something. They were like the Poltergeist. I think they were called the Poltergeist, the Goddess, and the Demon. I don't remember. They had completely different names, but they were the Demon, the Fiend, and the Goddess, basically. But they couldn't fit. They called one of them the Poltergeist. I think it was Sephiroth that got called Poltergeist. But yeah, so they were never officially called those things in the game itself. But it was discovered that behind the scenes they were officially named Sephiroth, Sophia, and Zervan. So when they came into Final Fantasy XIV, they used those names from behind the scenes. So yeah, that's still the Warring Triad from Final Fantasy VI. Sephiroth, yeah, I know which one was which, but I couldn't remember if they had like shitty names in the game itself. Like I couldn't remember if Poltergeist was Demon, or if they used it for something else, or if they had like other fancy names, because it wasn't even Poltergeist. It was like, yeah, it was PLTRGSSEST. I couldn't fucking say ST. So I said, yeah, but that's how it works. Another question. Are you going to lovely crafters? Yeah, when I get the crafting beast stripe. Luckily I answered that earlier. Moving on. Number 13, can you explain what a Peaches question is and where this meme came from? So PAX East in, was it PAX East 2015, I want to say? I think in PAX East 2015, there was a live Q&A session with Naoki Yoshida and I think it was Koji Fox that time. And basically somebody asked, there was a chance to do live Q&A, and somebody got up and asked, we have all these different fruits and vegetables that we're familiar with in the real world, but there's no peaches yet. When are you going to add peaches to the game? And everyone was like, are you fucking kidding me? You have an opportunity to ask a question to the developers, to the guy who handles lore, and you're going to ask why we don't have peaches in the fucking game? Are you kidding me? And everyone was like, oh my fucking God, never give NA a microphone and let them ask questions ever again. And so ever since then, whenever there's like a question in an interview or something where it's like, why the fuck are you using this time to ask this question? It's something that's like so, like, just, it's not consequential or beneficial to anybody but the person who's asking it. And that's a Peaches question. So that's where the meme came from, and that's what it means. So if you ever hear a Peaches question, that's the source point. Next question, number 14. Hey, Haps, does it make sense for Byakuya Extreme to be easier than Shinryu and offer better weapons? So from an item level perspective, no. But that's the way MMOs work. The newer stuff drops better stuff. And every encounter can't always be harder every single than the previous encounter. That's one of the big things with vertical progression is when you have an easier fight that drops a higher item level. I mean, take your question even further. Does it make sense for Byakko to be harder than Shinryu? Obviously, you would say it makes sense for Shinryu to be harder than Susanoo and Lakshmi, but does it make sense for Susanoo and Lakshmi to be easier than Zervan? Does it make sense for Zervan to be easier than Sophia? Does it make sense for Sophia to be just about the same as Nidhogg? Does it make sense for Nidhogg to be easier than Sephiroth? Does it make sense for Sephiroth to be easier than Thornton? You know, like you can, if depending on how you actually find those fights in terms of difficulty, the item level keeps going up, but the difficulty is never consistent. You can never base difficulty based on the item level of the drops, because the item level of the drops is only significant because of the patch in which the content is releasing. It's not indicative of the strength of the encounter, minus the fact that Savage and Ultimate drop higher item level within the same patch range because they are more difficult. But it's also just a factor of being the newer thing. So you can't, there's no causation and correlation there other than it's a new patch, so item level goes up, pretty much. Going on to question number 15. Hey, Happy. How do you feel about the growing trend of fights having special parts with button mashing in the Byakko falling section? I feel adding the extra difficulty to the part in Shinryu Extreme was dumb, not hard. It wasn't even difficulty. It was just a sequence, really. I don't know. I don't think anyone would call button mashing difficult. As it could exclude some people with health... Okay, well, this is taking a different turn. As it could exclude some people with health issues and disabilities from completing it. What about the falling parts? When the falling parts started in Byakko, I thought it would be hard, but it wasn't. How long before these actually become hard? It reminds me of the old Alex... Oh, never mind. Then it went back to being about difficulty. It reminds me of the old Alex Kidd games where you could get through a level, then lose a game of rock, paper, scissors. I'm worried this becomes a problem. So they're just trying to do different things. That's all it really is. I think with Primals, they've set the precedent at this point where they want that to be your stepping stone into actual 8-man content. They want you to look at an Extreme Primal and go, you know what? If I was paired up with 7 other random people, I could probably figure this out. And then when people get comfortable in that setting, they potentially start to seek out raiding with other like-minded individuals. And then that's how they move into Savage. And then, you know, it's all about getting people invested in a different aspect of the game. And that's the thing that I feel like having so few bosses in Savage is really damaging. Because you could have that initial interest of going into Byakko, and then you could go into 05 Savage, and you could go into 06 Savage, but then you're going to get to 07, and it's such a spike in difficulty because they want this they want this difficulty curve to just kind of exponentially go up after the second fight, that it creates it creates what the community calls a wall. It's not like 07 Savage is this insurmountable wall that like a player couldn't improve and pass, but it would just be so much smoother of a difficulty curve if they had more bosses in that range of difficulty. And I feel like until they're willing to do that, they're going to keep finding that the clear rates just start to fall off massively when you go past anything that's the second fight of a raid tier. And then those players are just, unless they're already naturally gifted or so up for improvement that they actually do get through the whole thing, they're not players that eventually feed into being able to clear the whole raid tier or being able to clear Ultimate. It just doesn't work like that. You can't just send them halfway and then not give them the proper tools to move up from one step to the next because you decided the next step needed to be 10 feet higher than the previous one. So that's just kind of how it works. And again, I don't think that they're doing those things as part of health issues. I think they're just trying to do different things. That's all they're really trying to do. So then we have question number 16. Hey, Mr. Happy, I have a question about the raid team and what you think now being 2 tiers into the Stormblood raids. I feel like the way raids are done now, time-based is better or worse than Alexander, where things are based HP percentage-wise for mechanics and such I gotta start the question over. I have a question about the raid team, what you think of it now being 2 tiers into Stormblood raid. Do you feel that the way raids are done now, time-based, is better or worse than Alexander, where things were based HP percentage-wise for mechanics and such, and who do you think either benefits the most? Hardcore raiders, casuals, midcore, etc. I think there's places to do them both differently. So what we learned a lot with HP-based pushes is that very often mechanics are completely lost to the encounter. When you do, and keep in mind that time-based has still a similar issue. The difference between percentage-based phases and time-based phase changes. With the percentage-based ones, there's a lot of pressure sometimes to skip specific phases that are early to midway into the fight. Whereas with time-based ones, you're rewarded with skipping some of the, I guess, repeated mechanics at the end, which are just there to kind of test you and how well you're able to keep up with the stamina of a long fight. You skip phases at different points in the encounter is really the only thing that's actually achieved by doing that. But what it means is that odds are most people who are doing your encounter will see everything you intend them to see. And I think that that is the smart thing to do. When you gear up, when you have HP based, even if it works that way the first week, well, the next week when everyone has more gear and is maybe a little bit more comfortable, then it starts to not work. I think there's room for both, and I think they need to find a better balance instead of moving all in one direction. And I don't think it benefits anyone in particular. I think it just, it makes it so that everyone sees what they're intended to see. So even if somebody's skipping the last two phases, odds are they saw those two phases already, and that those are just repeats of the phases they already saw. And it's okay to skip that because you didn't actually skip a mechanic. You just skipped the second appearance of the mechanic. And I think that that's okay. Bonus question. Why do you think that the dev team gives us these odd ad encounters such as A9 through 11 and then just threw them away for Savage 05 and 5 where they have a little to no difference? I mean, if you look at 07 Savage, the ads there are pretty consequential if you do them wrong. And then 05 Savage is meant to be the thing that gets you into that raid tier. If it's your first time raiding in the game, they want you to be able to catch up with the community and go right into 05 Savage after you've done the normal modes. And then also be able to pick up basic concepts of raiding in that very first raid tier. Obviously, you have Viako for that as well. But, I mean, A9 it had a lot of ads, but, I mean, it was just position and kill the ads. Like, that's all it is. I mean, it's kind of the same thing. Jesus Christ. It's kind of the same thing. It's just that with the passengers, you don't need to position them. They just need to die in time. And then with A10, they had an ad that was, consequential, and then they had the steamroller, but I wouldn't really compare. And A11, they had that ad too, and that's very comparable to the way the 07 ads are done. So I wouldn't say they threw them away. I'd say they just didn't, this tier in particular, have a phase where the ads were so different or so interactive with the fight other than 07 Savage. Oh god, I put my phone down and just slid off. And then we have the final question here over on the forums. Hey Haps, congrats on getting buffed out the ass. So we've had enough time to figure out that war DPS is insane. Oh, you know what? I just realized you're not referring to odd ad encounters in the fight. You're referring to the actual trash before the boss, because you're referring to normal mode. Oh, I didn't even think about that. I just realized that right now. Probably because the trash was meaningless. That's all it really is. The chat brings up something interesting. Omega makes you do the trash in that solo instance before you actually go into the fights themselves. And because the fights themselves are just challenges of, hey, I want to put you up against this boss, then lore-wise, it doesn't make much sense to also go up against trash when we're inside of the Sigmascape and the Deltascape. So, yeah, they just don't do anything. That was the big reason. It was just such meaningless trash that no one really cared about it. So, going into the last question now that I've cleared up that last question, Grass are getting buffed out the ass. Thank you. So we've had enough time to figure out that War's DPS is insane, and that Paladins and Dark Knights are basically doing the same damage, which means the Dark is unvalued again. Yay! We all knew that. With that said, do you expect them to leave it as is or nerf Paladin again? No, I think Paladin's fine. At this point, it's about making Dark Knight more fun and rounding them out. Honestly, I think they may have overdone it a little bit with Warriors, but Warriors are having fun for now, so enjoy that fun, because you were, you just enjoy it, because you never know how long that fun is going to last. Also, curious of your thoughts around the current melee DPS balance. It's a lot better. I still don't know what the fuck they're doing with Samurai, but I've seen a lot of groups change from Dragoon Ninja to Monk Ninja to try it out. I've seen people going Monk Dragoon and using shirks. This raid tier is very not ninja reliant in terms of enmity. There's a few spots where Shadewalker and Smokescreen are really nice, specifically thinking of like the ad spawning in 07 Savage. But because there's no hard tank swaps, there's also a lot of room for tanks to manipulate enmity using shirk. One example I've seen 07 Savage is you actually have a tank go pick up an ad, and then you have the main tank provoke the ad, and then have... So what you do is you have the main tank provoke... No, I'm doing this all wrong. I'm trying to prove a point here to what I've seen happen. Basically, I've seen tanks just provoke an ad to get enmity on it just to shirk onto the other tank, just to raise their base enmity value and then give that enmity to the tank, as opposed to using something like Shadewalker. That's what I was trying to say. I've seen some like clever uses of it like that make me go, oh, you don't need a ninja for Shadewalker, but Trick Attack is still really good. So, and then if you do have Shadewalker Smokescreen, it's really nice. There's just been much more creative use of the tank enmity tools and the increased enmity, I guess the decreased enmity of diversion, that it doesn't feel like the ninja's enmity tools are as crucial this tier as they may have been in a previous tier. It'll probably change again because we'll probably get more tank swaps going into the final tier of Omega, and that's where, on top of the shirks and lots of ads spawning, you get a lot of, hey, you know, ninja, just Shadewalker me on cooldown so I can stay in DPS stance kind of thing. We'll see. There's a lot of room for that to change, especially over the next few weeks. And then whatever they do to the tanks, because who the hell knows what they're going to do to the tanks next, we'll have to see. But anyway, that's going to be a wrap for this. Now there's no more LA sounds, there's no more cat distractions, there's no more anything. That's going to be the end of this one. I'm going to go start typing something up and drink some water, so I actually have a voice to record my 06 Savage guide with after this. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you again to our sponsors over that we thanked at the start of the video. Twitch chat, I'm going to hang out with you guys for a few more minutes before I go and continue working on my 06 Savage guide. But those of you watching on YouTube, be sure to ask your questions next week. Check the description of the video for a forum thread where you can go and ask questions. And yeah, hopefully you're looking out for the guides. I'm going to be trying to get out the Savage guides first because there's a lot more demand for them this tier than I feel like there has been for previous tiers. And then I'll work on all the other stuff. And plus I've got other videos that are coming. There's one this week I think you guys will enjoy a lot. But I'm going to go get working on that stuff. So thank you over on the YouTube side of things. Twitch will hang out for a few minutes. I'll see you all next time. And until then, take care. Oh, and there'll probably be like Twitch